Hello, hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple of cards using shimmer powders, specifically my Tonic Nuvo Shimmer Powders. These I have had for years and years. And I have a playlist linked at the end of this video in the end screen of all the videos I've done over the years using these ones, as well as the Lindy's Magicals powders, which behave in very similar ways. Basically, the biggest difference is like the container. So yeah, I haven't used them in a while. It's been a while since I've played with them. So I pulled them out and I use them with this newer Dreamy Leaves stamp set from Simon Says Stamp. There's just something about these like ginormous leaves. So I ended up making Sympathy cards, and all the other products I used were kind of oldie but goodie favorites of mine. So, as always, links to all the things that I used are in the description box below the video. All of my links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I get a little kickback from that at no additional cost to you guys. That's what helps pay the bills, keep the garage heated, all the things. And then, yeah, keep watching and I will show you guys how I made these cards. Alrighty, so the first thing I needed to do was some heat embossing. So I have some Canson XL watercolor paper, and I put it in my MISTI, and then I've got this Dreamy Leaves stamp set, and I'm going to try and fit all of the leaves. I end up using all of them onto this panel. Right now this panel's just slightly bigger. I get my packs of Canson XL from Simon Says Stamp, and they're 9 by 12 is that size. That's about the standard size of most watercolor paper. And then I cut most of it down to, like, I cut it in half and then I cut it in half again. So I get 4 sheets per, panel. And that gives me like 4.5 inch by 6 inch pieces, which is great because it's a little bit bigger than an A2 card. It gives me a little leeway. So that's what I'm working with. And so I got all the leaves arranged, took the panel out of my MISTI so I could put my anti-static powder on that. That just helps to prevent the embossing powder from clinging to anything other than the stamped image. And then I'm inking up the stamps with clear embossing ink, stamping it, and I'm going to do this twice. It just kind of depends, but I found if I just do this, especially on watercolor paper, this watercolor paper is not super textured. Again, it varies across brands, etc. But that's another reason why I like the Canson XL is it's not super textured. I can generally, you can see these stamps have a ton of detail. I can get a lot of detail on there. And yeah, I just find though, especially with detail, things like this, if I'm inking them up and stamping them at least a couple times, I also like lift my MISTI up so I can kind of tilt it in the light to see that I got everything stamped. I just got, it's better to be safe than sorry, really. That's the thought process on there. So I stamped everything with clear embossing ink, and then I coated it with Simon's Detail Gold embossing powder. And yes, those of you that have watched for a long time and know my other playlist that has, I don't even know how many videos at this point, my obsession with black, gold, and white cards. When I was doing this, I was like, oh, I could just be done. Just stick a sentiment on it and be done. These leaves are gorgeous. I'm gonna have to play with the set even more because, oh man, literally, I could have just added a black and white sentiment, called it a day. But I was wanting to play with my shimmer powders. So, melted everything with my heat tool until everything is shiny and fabulous. Just tilting it in the light, making sure there's no dull greeny areas, that everything is smooth and melted. And then I'm going to tape these down to a hardboard. You don't have to do this, but again, if you ever worked with shimmer powders or watched my other videos, I have a better time when I tape these down because when you are spraying any watercolor paper with a lot of water, it naturally is going to start to curl. Not the end of the world, it'll flatten as it dries out. However, when you've got like shimmer powders, etc. on it and it starts to curl, everything runs off the sides and it's a nightmare. I fight with it, and yeah, so I try to make it a habit now. Just tape it down. It makes life so much easier. So that's what I did. I taped these panels down to a hardboard, and then once they're taped down, I'm going to start adding my shimmer powders. And I pulled out 3, and there's many colors available of these tonic ones, and then the Lindy's ones. There are tons, so many colors, so fun. So I'm using Lilac Waterfall, Atlantis Burst, and Blue Blitz. Now, specifically with these tonic ones, do not squeeze the bottles. Just don't do it. It's in one of the videos in the playlist. I'm pretty sure I left it in way back in the day. Squeeze it once, you'll learn. You'll get a pile of powder, and you do not need it. And it's very difficult to get back into the container. It just, they got pigments and binders and shimmer and all the things, and you don't need very much. The more you play with them, the more you kind of get comfortable with them, and you start discovering like which ones are what I like to call like more powerful. Like the Blue Blitz, the third color added, it's a powerful color. Like it will take, and you can see it'll take over just about everything because it's just so intensely pigmented. But basically all I do is I gently tap my finger on the bottle, hold it upside down over wherever I'm adding the powders, and then I just tap it, or I'll run my fingernail kind of on the seam of the bottle, and that's all you need, because like powder will come out, and I just sprinkle it all over, and then I spray it with water. And it looks like a hot mess. Like this looks like an absolute just garbage mess. You gotta trust the process. You gotta let it dry. And I also always say, don't muck with it. Like leave it. I'm breaking my own rules. I just took a little brush and I was just kind of going over just where the leaves were, because I was concerned that the way everything was pooling, because there's so much heat embossing, that I wouldn't get much color in the leaves. But again, I mucked around with it a teeny bit, and then I was like, nope, you know better. Let it dry, which I did, and then night and day difference, So after it was dry, I just took my microfiber cloth and just kind of rubbed over it just gently, more so to remove anything still sitting on top of just the heat embossing. Everything else is fine. I get asked a lot, like, do I seal these? Like, no, I don't use any sort of sealant. I don't do anything with that. That's also why I spray it so heavily with water, because if there's still powder sitting on here, if you haven't used enough water and there's still powder, that is just going to come off. It's going to wipe off in your hands. It's going to fall off the cardstock, etc. So yeah, I spray it real good, and then I'm fine with it. And like Tim Holtz always says, don't lick the artwork, I'm not concerned about it after that point. So yeah, it just is what it is. However, you could, if it, really bothered you, or just maybe your climate too, because that could affect it totally. There are different like sealants out there, spray sealants, etc. I'm not the one to ask about it because I just don't bother. So anywho, I also added splatter. The first bit was white gouache mixed with a bit of water, and I just used my fan brush. And that looks a little more intense right now, but it will also dry back because it'll kind of pull up some of the color, underneath it and soften. And then I used one of the golds from my Gansai Tambi palette, added that splatter as well, let everything dry. And then I die cut these backgrounds with one of Simon's basic rectangle wafer dies. So I got them die cut, everything's good to go. And then for my sentiment, this is one of the oldie but goodie favorites. This is the CZ Design with Sympathy wafer die. And I die cut the words from white cardstock as well as Simon's matte gold cardstock. And then the outline I die cut with vellum. And this is one of the few times I did not stack these sentiments, because usually it's like the rule, dimension is life, aka Laura Basson, and I like my sentiments stacked, but this time I didn't. I just took the gold sentiments and I'm adhering them to the vellum outline just as is, using my little craft tacky glue, and I've got my MISTI precision glue press. I've had people asking about this again lately. I do have a review of this on my channel. A few months ago I posted one. So genuinely loving it. Wouldn't keep using it, wouldn't be showing it if I didn't like it. So I'm adhering the sentiments to the vellum. And then the white cardstock die cuts, those I'm adhering underneath the vellum. I've shown this in many videos. The thought process with this, and especially with die cut sentiments like this that are much finer lined, they're not thick, they're not chunky. This makes it a lot easier to adhere directly behind, because vellum adhesive shows through vellum. I don't care what anyone says. I don't care what any brand says, like, oh, I've got a vellum, an invisible adhesive. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. There's other ways around it. I've shown it in other videos, but for the most part it doesn't work. So I stick the cardstock die cut behind there. It's easier. That way I don't have to trace behind the sentiment on the vellum. Plus it'll pop the vellum up just a smidge, and it gives it that little extra something. So I did that with the sentiments. I set it aside. The leaves were still in my MISTI. I took my card bases, which are top folding A2 note cards, so 5.5 by 4.25, and I folded the cards inside out so that I'm stamping this on what will be the inside of the card base. And I inked up those stamps with Simon's Seafoam ink, which is a pretty light ink. But before I actually stamped it, I put a scrap of paper on top of the card and stamped that first, and then stamped it without re-inking the stamps. I'm stamping it on the inside of the card. So it doesn't look like much in the video, but it just gives more of a faint impression of these leaves onto the inside of the card with that second generation stamping, and just, you know, gives me the pattern, gives it that little bit of color, but it's not super busy, so that the inside of the card isn't completely nuts. And again, depends on my mood what I'm doing. So after I did that, the other oldie but goodie product, this is the CZ Design Clean Line Stacks stamp set. And I pulled out a couple of the stamps from the set, lined those up, and those I'm stamping with Concord and 9th Stardust ink. I decided not to use black because I didn't use any black on the front of the card, and then decided rather than, you know, having that kind of harshness after, you know, the outside of the card's kind of soft, calm colors, etc. So I pulled out Stardust because that's the closest to gold without getting into pigment ink. I love me a gold pigment ink. They're gorgeous. Just more often than not, I'm too impatient to use them because they do take a while to dry, or they need to be heat set. So the easiest way around that is and the closest color I've come across is the Concord and 9th Stardust color. So I stamped those sentiments on the insides of the cards, and then adhered the die cut sentiment to those panels. Once those are adhered, I decided to pop these panels onto the card bases with some Altenew foam tape, because for everything else, I'm keeping these fairly simple. You know, I've got the pattern and the color and then the die cut sentiment, and I'm not going to add any other bling, I know, or embellishments or anything. I liked how these were just as is. So I put the foam tape on the back of these panels, peeled off the backing, and then I'm going to center these onto the card bases, and that's going to finish off these cards. So like I said in the intro, I will link to my playlist using all the different, like all the videos I've done using the 2 different kinds of shimmer powders. So I'll link to that in the end screen. And then, like I said, I'll have links to all of the supplies I used, a link to my blog post, my social media links, all the things. That'll be in the description box directly below the video. So you can just open that up, expand it. All the info will be there for anyone who is interested. And then, as always, thank you all so very much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, letting the robot overlords know you like what you're seeing. Subscribe if you haven't. I'd love to have you. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye.